Democrats and Republicans are in the final sprint toward the midterm elections. In a new glossy campaign ad, Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis sought to highlight how blue-collar workers benefited from his anti-lockdown measures that many states, particularly blue states, have embraced.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Today we deliver for the people of Florida yet again.
You saved our jobs.
And kept us going.
They tried to shut us down, but you saved our business.
$1,000 bonuses.
You had our backs.
And honored our service.
You led by facts, not fear.
And you let us decide.
You let me go to school.
You gave me a voice.
You put us first.
And didn't let them keep us apart.
You let us learn.
You let us compete.
All of us.
You protected our right to worship together in person.
And you raised our pay.
You protected our waters.
And kept Florida beautiful.
When they attacked you, you didn't cave.
You stood strong for Florida.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Gracias, Gobernador DeSantis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor DeSantis.
So I thought it was a pretty effective ad. What are your feelings?
Sure. I don't know that I'm necessarily...
Well, you're not the target audience for it, no. But, right, if you're... Well, look, so he's running against Charlie Crist, who is the Democratic candidate. Charlie Crist, obviously a former Republican, was the governor of the state, and then, if I have my recollection right of how this happened, ran for Senate, switched parties sort of at the end of was kind of disaffected with Bush stuff, and has become a pretty committed partisan Democrat, but with a veneer of moderation because he was a former Republican, but like intensely almost annoyingly kind of never Trump person, the exact kind of person that mainstream media that
nobody likes.
Yes,
mainstream
that
media
the mainstream media holds up and like here's a Republican we can work with. He's not even a Republican, he's a Democrat,
right.
But this is the guy.
He represents no real person.
No one.
This is a combination of beliefs, traits, and histories that no one actually has in the entire United States of America. Entirely. Look,
so he's not going to win.
It's very frustrating. I'm saying some version of this happens, and progressives complain about it all the time. It's not always necessarily someone who's literally a former Republican, but it's people who might as well be, and on top of the Liz Cheneys of the world, on top of CNN or MSNBC rather being populated by mostly. Like so many of their chief hosts are former Republicans, whether it's Nicole Wallace being Bush's comms person, whether it's Joe Scarborough. I mean, the whole lineup. Basically,
and they're not, and importantly, they're not Republicans who've like economically and foreign policy wise moved to the left and are talking to Democratic audiences about how if you moderate some of your aggressive cultural, social leftism, you would do better. Those people themselves have become more culturally liberal. They have all the same foreign policy views.
Yeah,
so it's like the worst combination
of all of the things entirely. And I will say, it is frustrating to see constantly Democrats rather do this, to put forward these candidates that don't reflect the interests of anybody in the country, and then when they ultimately fail, which is very likely to happen, blame somehow progressives and the fact that the country needs to just move farther to the right instead of maybe these politicians need to be more insightful about which policies and approaches.
But to be clear, I think a
progressive
candidate would also fail in Florida. I mean, I think DeSantis is popular in Florida. This is a message that there's just simply more Republicans in Florida now. It's becoming a red state, not a swing state.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, there is a characterization of Florida as a country, as a state that is conservative and moving to the right, but it's also a state, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to keep saying this, that voted for a minimum wage the same year on the same ballot that they voted for Donald Trump to be president of the United States of America, with 60% of the vote. They had a filibuster-proof majority of Floridians saying that they wanted a living wage. And in response to that, Florida, Florida leadership, Republican leadership, which knows that this is something that the people of the state want, have been working overtime to not just suppress that initiative, but to make it more difficult for similar ballot initiatives to come down the pike. They, for example, recently passed a bill, the GOP legislature passed a bill to increase the number of signatures required for initiatives to be placed on the ballot, and also have shrunk the length of time the signatures are valid from 4 years to 2, meaning that they can only use them for one election cycle, which means that all of the expense that goes into collecting enough signatures to get something that the people want on the ballot is going to be even more difficult and more expensive.
Those are probably bad things.
It's anti-democratic.
Yeah, I don't agree with the minimum wage policy, and I would have voted against that measure as well. But I do agree with you.
But the people of Florida do want it.
And in general, I'm a fan of the ballot initiative process. I'd rather just simply put policy. If we're going to have policy questions decided by governments, I'd just rather put it to the people directly, get the politicians out of the way.
So you have to ask the question, if Florida is so conservative, if they have such a lock on these conservative issues, then why is it that the GOP legislature is working overtime to prevent the people from actually having a voice? That is the question that people are going to have to continue to answer. But the move from DeSantis comes amid a bitter battle for the governorship between him and Democratic candidate Charlie Crist. We have some polls that show that Crist is not faring especially well. And while Crist may be attempting to put forth a fervent effort, DeSantis remains wildly popular, and polls indicate he's favored to win re-election. 538 is projecting DeSantis has about a 93% chance of winning in the state, which has moved more right, arguably, to my point earlier, in recent years. I
mean, it's moved right even since 2016, though. Didn't Donald Trump do better in 2020 than he did in 2016?
That is not, but look, the way you're able to identify these never-Trump Republicans as a weird mishmash of ideological beliefs that don't really map onto what it means to be a Republican on average, these terms like right, left don't mean anything anymore. We have a political party system that is designed to pick and choose issues precisely so that people never recognize the extent to which there are issues that have overwhelming consensus about them. And that's the point of these left populist campaigns. If you go down the list, of Bernie Sanders' agenda, you're going to find policy after policy that has 60% or more support, including support from Republicans. So something like Medicare for All had 49% of Republicans on board. Half of Republicans were on board, not to mention 88% of Democrats, to bring it to an overwhelming majority. A $15 minimum wage, canceling medical debt, canceling student debt. All of these policies were overwhelmingly popular. A wealth tax, an overwhelming majority of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, support a wealth tax, and we don't get politicians running on any of those policies. Why not?
Some of those questions depend on how they're. I've looked at the polling for student loan debt.
Every question depends on how you ask everything.
Right, yes.
So if I sat here and said, do you support the war in Ukraine, I could ask that 50 different ways and get 50 different results, but in no other context do we pick and choose at the polls in this exact same way. Look, at the end of the day, you don't need a poll to tell you that Americans are fed up with their healthcare system. They're tired of being victims of cancer and other treatable illnesses just because they don't have the money to pay for those kinds of things.
Yes, they'll answer a poll being against
housing crisis. No,
that's not a responsive.
They're against the idea that there's no transparency in billing, that they're afraid to go in and get even checkups because they don't know if they're going to get a surprise bill that they can't afford. It's going to send them into bankruptcy. They're upset about a lot of things.
United by our common frustrations with various systems.
Right, but the political system does not form its parties or run campaigns around the things that we share in common. There could be someone that says, okay, let's put some of these cultural issues aside. We're in a crisis, an economic and global crisis right now. We're going to run purely on protecting workers, labor rights, a minimum,
Ask
a
people
living
if they
wage.
want. Do you want the government more involved in the delivery of education? Do you want the government more involved in between you and your doctor? You want the government to have more say or more direction or how this goes?
You're right, Robbie. You can ask questions to divide people, just like you did. And that's exactly what both political parties have been doing for decades.
You can ask them in a magical, do you want everything fixed
it's
by...
It's not magical. We have something called Medicare. It works, and it's a popular policy. And when people have the option, when you ask people, do you want to lower the Medicare age so that more people can take advantage of it, the answer is a resounding yes. And that's all Medicare is. Lowering the Medicare accessibility age by 10 years over the course of 4 years or so.
I don't disagree with that. This was Donald Trump's singular political kind of insight. highlight is he did not run against the welfare state or the social safety net in the way previous Republicans has, and he was more successful.
Right, run on addressing the opioid pandemic and getting people the health care they need. Run on all of the things that it's not rocket science. Run against the telecom companies. Run against cold callers. Run against the fact that Comcast has us all in a vice grip. Run against all of the things that everyone agrees on. Right, but we never see that kind of messaging from campaigns, and I gotta say, it is not an accident. Both parties rely on messaging and polling that makes it seem as though we are a divided nation, that there is no way for us to be unpolarized, and people fall for it because there are millions and millions of dollars spent to making sure that they never realize that they actually substantively agree with their neighbor.
But some of these are difficult policy questions where there are substantial trade-offs and they're not easy answers.
All right, so the Republicans say let's rely on the fact that we can criticize everything. You can criticize anything in the world. Every single thing has pros and cons. We'll weaponize that reality to make sure that nothing ever happens. And who is suffering? The people in Florida who can't afford rent, the people in Florida who don't have a living wage,
they
the
say
people
let's
in Florida
not
who
make
have
it
a corrupt
worse,
water system.
make it worse by adding another army of bureaucrats to study this problem.
Don't add another army of bureaucrats to study the problem. That's what Democrats do. They say they want to have a commission to study the efficacy of the blah, blah, blah. No, people need to do things. Government used to work because it hired people that were actually experts in their field. FDR famously hired people who were actually farmers and practitioners to work in his agriculture department and things like that. And so that people actually understood what was going on, and the government can actually do things instead of outsourcing to private contractors that fleece Americans, like what has just happened in Jackson, Mississippi. The city has a $200 million bill that it had to litigate to get some of it absolved, not all of it, for a private company to fix the water system, and it ultimately didn't actually do it, and we see what they're going through today.
Years later, the Great Depression was in as full swing as it was at the beginning.
If people want to accept your worldview...
That was exactly the example of adding armies of bureaucrats to tackle a problem that makes no difference.
The listeners can make their own choice, and if people want to accept your worldview that there are downsides to doing things, so we might as well not do anything at all. Why parent? Because some of the things I say to my children are going to scar them for life. I might as well just throw them in their room and lock the door and slide food under the door. Like, come on, every single thing you do has potential for failure and downsides. But we stop being a community and we stop being a country when we stop trying and we stop letting the people have a say in the efforts to make their own communities better.
We and the government are different things. Does the government make things better? We can make things better.
We should be the government, which is exactly why I did a radar last week that you had some objections to about the negative influence of money in politics and the kind of politicking the GOP is doing right here to get between the people and their ballot measures and what they actually want. If you are so confident that all of these things that people want are going to fail, at the very least you could let the people try them so you could substantiate your argument.
All right, we got to go. More Rising after this.